Signed, sealed, and delivered. Pac-12 Breakdown comes your way Wednesday night right here, 11 o'clock Eastern Time, 8 o'clock there on the West Coast. We bring in the best bloggers, and of course, we really are needing some hard work, boys, tonight. National Signing Day. This is the biggest day of the offseason, maybe arguably the biggest day of the entire year. It is the lifeblood of every college football program. We bring in Don King from Last Word on Sports, Jack Fullman in the center from Pacific Takes, and also Nick Dempsey from Conquest Chronicles and Rule of Tree to help us sort it out there in the Pac-12. So, Don, let's start with you. On a day that USC seemed to claim the Pac-12 championship with Stanford and UCLA closely behind, I really like what Washington did, kind of in a quiet way. What caught your attention?
Yeah, good for Clay Helton. He got out of the blocks quickly, closed well today. Good job by him. And I do think USC probably did win the day and have the best class in the Pac-12. Good day for David Shaw and Stanford as well. Closing the deal on several guys who were in the pipeline for quite a while and flipping a couple of key guys down the stretch. Devery Hamilton from Michigan, Andrew Pritz, I hope I'm saying that correctly, flipped late from Penn State, plucked right out of his own backyard there in Pennsylvania, and Michael Williams, the defensive tackle from Texas, taken away from Charlie Strong, who may have had the best day of all of the FBS Division I coaches on a national basis, but Michael Williams got away and heads out to the farm.
Hey, Jack, it's a day in which, despite solid days out of Arizona State, Washington, and Oregon, also Utah thrown in there, that USC, Stanford, and UCLA seem to distinguish themselves as having top-level classes.
Yeah, that's for sure. And, I mean, as traditionally you would expect, the LA schools almost always close really, really well on National Signing Day, especially out west. No one really challenges those two schools when it comes to those big announcements on the last day of recruiting. It always seems like you just see USC and UCLA clean up, and that was definitely no different this year. Overall, big picture, though, I think a couple of the other interesting things were Stanford just getting another class that David Shaw has been, working with for the past few years, where it's just perfect for them with offensive linemen, linebackers, a lot of guys who fit that system perfectly. And then in the Northwest, you saw kind of a flip. Oregon had been a school that was known for getting out the gate really slow and closing really, really hard, but you saw the exact opposite of that this year, where they lost a lot of their best recruits kind of down the stretch, including a running back out of Hawaii today. And you saw Washington, who put together a really nice small class that I'd say, going back to the Northwest flip, I think it's the first time in a long time you might be able to say, hey, I would take Washington's class over Oregon's. And I think that might, for the Husky fans, I think that's hopefully the way things are going.
Jack, it looks like you've got the makings of a war room right there. Are you charting Pac-12 recruits behind you?
No, these are just places I have been, but I always forget that it's back there, and I like to leave it mysterious so people wonder what that stuff means.
Well, without the glut Southern California, I thought maybe that was some kind of a Pac-12 recruiting breakdown there.
It could be. Hey, that's my secret, I guess.
Very nice. Nick, your thoughts after you reviewed these classes with, again, USC, UCLA, and Stanford kind of separating themselves from the pack?
Yeah, I think what's really impressive is what Clay Helton was able to do within the constraints he had. You got to understand how difficult it is to try to recruit a kid in October, November, if you can't even promise that kid that you're going to be there come National Signing Day. Because, again, short of telling some serious half-truths, we didn't know who the USC coach was going to be up until the week before the Pac-12 championship game. And then after that, he spent the better part of January putting together his coaching staff. So that was really impressive with how he was able to close today, how his whole staff was able to close today. Despite all these limitations. I mean, to not even have a defensive line coach to meet with recruits when they come in to visit and still have them interested in your school is really kind of impressive. I think it probably speaks quite a bit to USC selling itself or recruiting itself in a lot of ways. And as far as Stanford goes, I guess one of the drawbacks of having a quietly assembling a very impressive class and having it all wrapped up by I think 10:15, 10:20 this morning Pacific time is that you don't necessarily get a lot of the national hype. You don't get those dramatic have a kid on ESPN2 put on a hat on national television type of moments. For the most part, this was a great class, but it was locked up for most of it. It was locked up for quite a while.
Yeah.
David Shaw's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, there was just the one notable exception that's still out there, Demetrius Robinson, who just retook his SAT last weekend, and he said he would not sign today anywhere until he could see whether or not he had been admitted to Stanford. So Shaw and all of Nerd Nation still sits with fingers crossed, hoping that score was high enough for him to clear the bar. We'll see what happens. So it could yet get a little bit better. That kid's a stud.
Yeah.
It's also looking at Georgia Tech, correct?
Yes, I think so. I think Notre Dame might even be in the mix. But he likes Stanford, and he at least wants to see if that's an option, and that's good news for the Card.
Just to continue off of something that Nick was talking about, the ESPN reporter that was camped out at Stanford was just talking to David Shaw fairly early in the morning, and I was thinking the same thing. This is the look of a guy who is well-rested, calm, has a plan, executed the plan, can rest easy, and now kind of kick back and review the fruits of his labor, Don.
Yep, and on to Kansas State, as Bill Belichick might say. You can go start game planning for the Wildcats in week 1.
Yeah, Jack, so this Washington class sneaks in there in the top 30, according to most services, rivals at 38, 7 4-stars out of 18 commits. Did it hit expectations for you?
I think it really did, especially considering how many games they won this year, 6 games in the regular season. You're going to put together a class that has that much talent in that low of numbers. They didn't take a lot of guys because the team, they barely graduated anyone last year. And realistically, I don't think it could have been much better. There was a few big names they missed on, and a few intra Pac-12 recruiting battles they lost out on, but not really that many. I mean, they really maximized the guys they went after, and I think one thing Washington fans have seen from Chris Peterson recruiting is that he identifies some guys early, then they lock them up a little bit differently than they used to under Steve Sarkisian, where it's kind of a crazy mess. And that really works well because they seem to get these guys early on, and it doesn't become a huge battle where they have to put all this time and resources into fighting every other team in the country off, till signing day and never knowing what's going to happen.
We talk about it all the time, and it's reflected in the recruiting rankings as well. Deep conference, very even conference. Maybe Stanford did distinguish itself on the field this past year, but did anyone see where Oregon State ranked? Out recruiting, based on the stats, Arizona and Washington State. Nice little year out of Oregon State and Gary Anderson.
Yeah, I did see him interviewed on the Pac-12 network earlier, and he did look quite pleased.
I mean, he's had past success at other schools, but he's got a long way to go before he gets up there.
And to be clear, those other schools weren't Corvallis, which isn't the easiest place to necessarily lure kids to. But I do think he's a good, solid coach. I think he's got a very strong set of relationships, particularly up and down the West Coast, and I do think he's gonna make a very competitive program up there, and probably a little bit sooner than people might think.
I'm going to hit you guys up with a number that's not going to shock anyone, but I would like to know if you think it's a problem. So out of the ESPN 300 recruits, 41 come out of the Pac-12 footprint. Guess how many out of California out of that 41? 34 out of California. Again, no big surprise, but you think that's a problem, Don?
A little bit. There's a real high concentration there. I did find interesting the breakdown of Stanford's class, which we've already discussed, and felt like it was pretty strong. Stanford only got 3 guys from California this year, and 6 from Texas, and then no more than 2 from any other state, which I thought was fascinating. So, you know, a lot of these California kids are perhaps headed elsewhere to play ball. It is interesting to me that it's so lopsided in favor of California when there are lots of good, strong programs, you know, across the footprint of the conference.
Hey, Jack, either this or anything that jumped out at you in terms of a storyline, demographics, anything that is facing the Pac-12 in those regards?
Yeah, going back to that a little bit, I think it's an interesting thing to pull out, and I think it'd be interesting to look at, the two programs that have dominated the Pac-12 the past almost decade now are Stanford and Oregon, and those are, the two schools outside of the LA schools that really recruit nationally, and I think it's it shows that it's a huge advantage to be able to recruit nationally because otherwise the Washingtons and the Arizona schools, they're fighting for the same guys in California, and now you're seeing it even more. You're seeing other schools from across the country just continue to raid California more and more and more each year. And
Yep.
Michigan with Harbaugh, he's going to be a thorn in the side of everyone in the Pac-12 for years to come. Notre Dame stepped it up. The SEC schools are creeping in more and more and more. I mean, the Pac used to kind of be in the Pac-12. It would be USC and maybe a little bit of UCLA would take their pick around California, then everyone else kind of duked it out. That's not the case anymore. You got to be ready to fight off pretty much any program you can think of from around the country. They're going to be they're getting up into Washington too, into Oregon and Colorado. You got to be ready to recruit nationally now.
Yeah, Jack, we had that conversation a couple of weeks ago about Ole Miss and Alabama in particular jumping out to the West Coast. I know Tennessee has in recent years as well to get some prime candidates. I really don't know why the SEC schools even need to leave that part of the country. But, Nick, any thoughts in regards to demographics and any challenges out there for the Pac-12?
I think this is probably at least a little bit a product of the game sort of becoming more national. It used to be a very regional game, and this is why the bowl games were so interesting because if you lived out in California, you didn't get to see the Big Ten champion play and vice versa. But now you've got just about every conference has their own national network. You've got just about every team gets on national television. So it's no longer, if you're a hotshot recruit out of Southern California, it's no longer that you only see and are exposed to USC and UCLA. Is it a problem? Sure. I think it is an automatic lock on those recruits if you're a California school. But I think one of the alleged challenges for, say, Stanford was that it was tough. It's tougher for them to get recruits in, so that forced them to go national, and that's why you frequently see Stanford's way ahead of the game on that in terms of a national footprint. They're down in Texas scooping up recruits. So I think it's just something you're going to have to deal with in this new national game. It's no longer a regional game, and is it a problem? Only if you're not good at recruiting nationally, I guess it would be a problem.
Yeah, good point.
And the
Really
other
good
trend
point.
that we're seeing is that these kids are getting into camp early. So we're seeing more early enrollees. I think the number seems to be in the 4 to 5 range is kind of an average per school. I've seen as high as 8 or 9. That means we're going to see these kids in spring practice. About a quarter of those recruits are going to make it on campus to mix it up and vie for some playing time pretty early on. So that being said, Don, we'll start with you in regards to any recruits out there, whether it be for Stanford or across the Pac-12, that you think might make a pretty immediate impact.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. Obviously Stanford can't early enroll anyone. It's against school policy. So that doesn't happen. And Shaw acts at least like he's good with it. I know he'd love to get his hands on those kids a little sooner, but that's life. Among the folks coming in, it might be hard to keep Caden Smith off the field his freshman year, particularly with Austin Hooper moving on to the NFL draft. He's just got all the physical tools. Shaw said earlier today that he's got the route running ability of a Zach Ertz and the straight line speed of a Kobe Fleener. That's tall cotton right there. We'll see if that's true, but if so, this kid might be Superman. I think Simi Fehoko, the wide receiver out of Salt Lake City, could be in the Trent Irwin role from last season as a true freshman. I could certainly see him getting onto the field. I doubt KJ Costello breaks into the lineup, even though he's almost certainly the quarterback of the future somewhere down the line. And this safety that flipped today from Penn State, Andrew Pritz, is known to be really physical. Wouldn't be shocked to see him find the field as well. The last thing, speaking of shoring up areas of need, Stanford signed 4 defensive tackles today, or defensive linemen, and it's been an area of thinness, if you will. So that's a really promising development. These kids are supposedly enormous physically, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're ready to play, Pac-12 football week in and week out. We'll see if 1 or 2 of them can find the field as well this season.
So Stanford's not quite ready to relinquish its standards and become a full-blood football factory.
Not quite. Not yet. We'll see what happens.
Jack, you've looked at the film. You look at scouting reports all over the conference. We know that you're scanning the entire 12 schools. Who are you anxious to see out there?
Yeah, a lot of guys. I think to keep it focused in on one school, I'll just go with Washington, because I think a lot of the USC and UCLA guys, they're just talented guys getting plugged into a talented roster. Washington, one guy to really watch out for was arguably the top running back recruit out west. They signed, his name was Sean McGrew. He's a tiny guy. I think he's 5'7", 170 listed. But he's kind of, he's explosive, a lightning bolt. And that offense at Washington is going to try to use him kind of as like a DeAnthony Thomas. And I think he's the one guy in that class who might play right away. And they don't have a lot of, talented receivers. So we know they have Myles Gaskin, but, to have a guy like that that can catch passes, but also be a change of pace running back, that could really help their offense as soon as next year. Other than that, kind of around the Pac-12, one immediate guy to watch for is Utah signed the #1 JC recruit in the country. His name is Garrett Bowles. He's a tackle. So look for him to step in right away and be another great JC transfer for Utah. Also, keep an eye on a quarterback they signed at Utah, Troy Williams. He started a game for Washington in 2014, it is, and they signed him. So he might be the guy who ends up stepping in for Travis Wilson.
Okay, Nick, with all this talent coming to the conference, who has your eye?
Coming in from this recruiting class, it's actually a little bit interesting because Sarkisian, I think, took about 6 scholarships from the 2016 class and awarded them. He oversigned last year. And then he had about another 7 early enrollees. So he's got almost half of this 2016 class is already on campus. But who I'm particularly excited about, USC is losing 4 defensive linemen after this last season. They've got a particular need there, and they picked up a 5-star defensive lineman who moved to the United States from Nigeria at the tail end of 2013. That's also the first time the kid's ever played football. But he is a 5-star recruit. His name is, I hope I'm not butchering this, Oluwole Batiku. He's 6'3", 250. He early enrolled. He's already on campus. He's one of the best defensive linemen in the country. And he should have plenty of opportunity to see the field very early on. There's a lot of very talented athletes that play wide receiver and defensive backs who can make some contributions. But right now, Batiku is definitely probably the early favorite to really make some noise out of the gate.
All right, very good. This is Pac-12 Breakdown coming your way every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock on the West Coast. And show usually gets posted to Rule of Tree, Conquest Chronicles, assorted places, including Mark Rogers TV on YouTube, as well as Last Word on Sports. So, guys, you always do the heavy lifting, but I think a little bit more so this week, so I appreciate it. We got Don King from Last Word on Sports, Jack Fullman from Pacific Takes, and also Nick Dempsey from Rule of Tree and Conquest Chronicles. Guys, there it is. We've got our signees for this year, and now we can dive into the off season, look forward to spring practice, and we're going to have to get a little creative with the shows upcoming here. But I'm sure we'll fill the time. So I appreciate it.
You got it.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.